The night of March 15th, 2025, the Giza Desert was bone-chilling under the waning moonlight. Amara Khalil signaled with her hand, a sharp gesture in the darkness. In the distance, the Antiquities Patrol team was nearing the end of the security perimeter, their flashlights lazily sweeping across the silent dunes. The moment had come. "Go," she whispered into the coms, her voice strained by tension. Her team moved like phantoms. Alina Rossi followed closely, her high-resolution camera like a ravenous third eye, ready to devour every secret. Next was Callum Fraser, the Scottish radar specialist, muttering quiet curses as he checked the screen of his handheld SAR device. Omar Hassan, veteran archaeologist and Amara's mentor, murmured a prayer, his breath catching with reverence rather than curiosity. Last was Silas, the silent one. He moved without a sound. His presence was both faint and unsettlingly heavy. They slid down a crudely camouflaged shaft, marked by Malanga and Biondi's team. A freezing gust, carrying the scent of millennia trapped in stone, hit their faces. The smell of dry sand mingled with something else, a metallic, rusted scent, like blood long dried. Amara's headlamp swept downward, revealing an unimaginable sight. They stood at the edge of a cylindrical well, impossibly deep and unnaturally perfect. Clinging to the smooth stone walls was a spiral staircase, casting shadows into the endless void. But what stole Amara's breath wasn't the scale of the structure, it was the ornaments. Across the steps and walls, dark red stains glimmered under the light, like raw rubies, dried blood. Thousands, perhaps millions of droplets, hardened. Over centuries formed a ghastly path into the abyss. "The Hall of Amenti," Omar whispered, his voice trembling. "The pathway of souls. Or just the slaughter ground of some ancient cult," Callum grumbled, though his usual certainty wavered. Amara said nothing. Memories of Luxor surged back, a painful failure where her arrogance had cost a precious artifact's destruction. That psychological wound still throbbed, driving her to be cautious, to verify everything. But this place challenged all logic. She pushed down her unease and donned the mask of a commander. "Stay close. Check your harnesses. We're going down." She was the first to step onto the staircase. It was icy and slick. Each step echoed in the well, creating a chorus of intrusion. Their flickering lights cast monstrous, distorted shadows that danced on the walls like demons beckoning. Amara glanced at Silas, trailing behind Omar. He didn't look into the abyss like the others. He stared at the stone intently, almost fondly, as if he wasn't exploring but returning home. The first seed of doubt sprouted in Amara's mind. They'd gone about 50 meters down when it began. A whisper. It came from no specific direction, seeping into their minds, an otherworldly sound, like the breath of the stone itself. "Come." Here, it wasn't a word, but a notion, a primal pull. "Did you hear that?" Elena asked, her voice laced with anxiety. "Just the breeze whistling through the crevices," Callum said quickly, but he gripped his device harder now. Amara knew it wasn't the wind. At that moment, she felt a faint vibration under her hand. On the wall, the stone was thrumming, a low, deep pulse, like the heartbeat of a colossal sleeping creature. She aimed her flashlight at the wall. This time, she saw clearly. Interwoven with the stone were dark red veins, writhing like blood vessels. They throbbed, splurch. One of the veins swelled and burst. A jet of thick, crimson liquid sprayed Amara's face, hot and reeking of rot. "Ah!" She screamed, stumbling back instinctively, nearly slipping off the step. She swiped at her face, the sticky, nauseating. "Amara, are you okay?" Omar asked, his voice full of concern. "I'm fine," she gritted out, trying to calm her racing heart. Just pressure leakage. But she knew it was a lie. They pressed on, their silence now thick with unspoken fear. The whispers grew louder, and the walls seemed to pulse stronger, as if the monster they were descending into was slowly stirring awake. Finally, after an endless descent, they reached the bottom of the well. Before them stood a colossal stone door, at least 10 meters tall. Its surface was covered in symbols Amara had never seen in any script, a grotesque amalgamation of Egyptian hieroglyphs and twisted, non-Euclidean symbols. And they were bleeding. Crimson liquid oozed from the carvings, dripping to the floor, pooling in a small puddle of blood before the door dot as the team stepped closer. The whispers in their minds sharpened into a single undeniable command, an irresistible urge: open it. As if in response, a crack echoed. The massive door trembled. A fissure split down its center, and it began to slide apart with a grating screech of stone on stone. A hotter, fouler gust wafted from within. Their flashlights pierced the darkness, revealing a scene that defied sanity. The space beyond wasn't a stone chamber. The walls weren't flat. They curved, soft, and pulsed rhythmically. Their surface was the red of muscle, crisscrossed with purple-green veins. The floor was a slick membrane of flesh dot. From deep within the living chamber, they heard the sound of a gigantic heart beating. Thump, thump. They stood at the threshold of a living ribcage, and it was beckoning them deeper inside. The grinding of the stone door ceiling behind them was a final sound. No way back. They were now inside, swallowed by a space that defied every law of biology and architecture. The only sound, aside from their own ragged breathing, was a deep, steady rhythm. Thump, thump. It wasn't just a sound, but a physical vibration, coursing through the fleshy floor beneath their feet, up through their soles and along their spines, as if they stood on the chest of a slumbering god. "Keep filming." "Elena," Amara ordered, her voice hoarse, clinging to professionalism to suppress the rising horror. "Record everything." Elena nodded, her face ghostly pale in the faint red glow seeping from cracks in the walls. The camera's glass eye swept the scene, a silent witness to this madness. The air was thick, hot, and humid, the stench of blood and decay clinging to their tongues, making every breath taste of death. They ventured deeper with caution. The spiral staircase they descended now looked even stranger. It was no longer solid stone, but seemed assimilated, with dark red veins coiling around it like ivy, pulsing with each beat of the chamber. Callum raised his SAR device, its screen displaying chaotic wave patterns. "These energy waves are unlike anything I've seen," he said, his voice tinged with panic. "They're coherent, almost like brainwaves. A massive primal brainwave." Driven by a morbid curiosity, Amara reached toward the pulsating fleshy wall. She hesitated for a second, then pressed her palm against it. It was startlingly warm and soft, like the skin of a giant beast. Then it twitched. A deliberate, powerful contraction gripped her hand. She yanked it back, her heart pounding. It wasn't just alive. It was aware of them. She looked down at the floor. Only now did she notice the small channels previously overlooked, radiating from the base of the staircase. Fresh blood flowed through them, a simple yet efficient circulatory system, nourishing the entire structure. As Amara tried to make sense of this with her useless archaeological knowledge, she caught sight of Silas. He stood apart from the group, a faint, enigmatic smile on his lips, utterly out of place in this nightmare. He was enjoying this. The thought chilled her more than the fleshy wall behind her. By the gods of ancient Egypt, Omar Hassan suddenly fell to his knees, his trembling hands clutching prayer beads. Protect your sinful children who've trespassed into your slumber. He began chanting ancient Arabic prayers, his voice an anchor of faith in an ocean of blasphemy. That's when the whispers struck. They were no longer vague. They became sharp, like needles piercing each mind. Weak, sinful, ambition, failure. That last word stabbed Amara's mind, but its primary target seemed to be Omar. The elderly man abruptly stopped praying. His eyes widened, staring into an unseen void. "Father?" he whispered, his voice laced with disbelief. "Omar, what's wrong?" Amara asked, stepping toward him. "Father." "No," Omar screamed, his hands clawing at his face in utter desperation. "Your skin. Oh God, it's cracking. No." His voice broke with agony, but to the others, he was screaming at an empty fleshy wall. As if reacting to Omar's pain, the chamber writhed. The fleshy walls convulsed violently. A nearby vein burst, spraying hot blood. It hit Elena, who screamed and stumbled back. Her camera flew from her hands, saved only by its strap. A sudden tremor hit. The entire structure shook violently, as if the beast were seizing. The spiral staircase rattled, stone fragments and viscous fluid raining from above. "It's collapsing," Callum shouted, but it didn't collapse. The shaking focused on the central pillar of the staircase. With a deafening crack, a massive section of the pillar's wall shattered, revealing a perfectly square, pitch-black void. A new passage. The thump, thump of the heartbeat now emanated from that passage, louder, clearer, an alluring summons. Omar had collapsed, exhausted and horrified. Elena trembled in a corner. They couldn't go back up. The only path was forward, deeper into the beast's body. Amara looked into the dark passage, then at her broken team. The scar of Luxor throbbed again. She couldn't fail again. "Help Omar up," she commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "We keep going." She led the way, stepping toward the darkness where the pulse of an ancient heart awaited. The square passage swallowed them into a new dimension of horror. The air was hot, humid, and thick, clinging to their skin and seeping into their lungs like a veil of flesh. The thump, thump of the colossal heart was no longer a distant echo. It was an omnipresent force, a physical pressure pounding against Amara's chest, making each breath a struggle. They stood in a vast corridor, a cubic space roughly 80 by 80 meters. The ceiling was so high their flashlights only caught a red mist hovering above. Everywhere walls, ceiling were massive, dark red muscle fibers, contracting and pulsing in a synchronized, ghastly rhythm. The floor was no longer a fleshy membrane, but a literal river of blood. Thick, viscous, ankle-deep, it flowed sluggishly. Forward, carrying fist-sized clots. "Unbelievable," Callum muttered, his voice faltering. He stared at his device, its screen showing perfectly synchronized waves. Resonance waves. This entire place is resonating at the same frequency. Like a single living organism, the size of a pyramid. Elena, her face drained of color, raised her camera instinctively. She panned frantically, trying to capture the unimaginable scale. "No one will believe this," she whispered. No one. As they waded forward, Amara noticed patterns on the walls. They weren't random veins. Fresh blood seeped from cracks, forming intricate shapes before joining the river below. Amara squinted. There they were. Qaeda symbols identical to those in her father's journal. They pulsed, glowing faintly with each beat of the corridor, as if conveying an ancient message. "It's beautiful," Omar suddenly sobbed. He was broken. His eyes gazed at the blood symbols with a crazed reverence. Amenti, the Hall of Records, the knowledge of the gods written in their own blood. He knelt in the river of blood, hands clasped, weeping uncontrollably. Amara saw a small, dark crack appear on Omar's neck, like a fracture in porcelain. This entity wasn't just manipulating minds. It was beginning to claim their bodies. Suddenly, the whispers in their heads turned into a scream, roar. The corridor contracted violently. From hundreds of pores in the fleshy walls, blood sprayed. Like a torrential rain, cascade of crimson pouring over them. "Watch out!" Amara shouted, but it was too late. They were engulfed in a wave of hot, viscous blood. It was sticky, rancid, seeping into eyes and mouths, making them choke and sputter. Amara tried to stand, but the current was too strong. She fell, submerged in the thick river. Amid the chaos, Silas's voice rang out, unnaturally calm. "Right. Beside her. It's awakening, see? It's welcoming us. We just need to push it a little further." Push it? The thought struck Amara like lightning. He wasn't part of the team. He was a believer. As the blood torrent subsided, hallucinations hit. For Amara, the corridor vanished. For a moment, she stood in a ruined city under a blood-red sky. Skyscrapers turned to bone pillars, and the river at her feet carried thousands of anguished faces, a vision of global annihilation. She shook her head, and the hallucination faded, but the image was seared into her mind. "My eyes, everything's red." Callum screamed, rubbing his eyes frantically. The hallucinations affected everyone, except Silas. The group's chaos and fear seemed to feed the place. The walls pulsed harder, the blood river surged faster. Then a new sound cut through it all. No longer a chaotic scream, but a single clear, powerful voice echoing from the planet. Corridor's end. Ancient yet youthful, masculine yet feminine. The voice of an omnipotent entity, and it called her name. Amara. The name didn't just sound in her mind. It reverberated in her chest, vibrating every fiber of her being. It was a command. A summons. The blood river beneath them flowed. Faster, pulling them toward the voice's source. The corridor ahead led to a brighter, vaster chamber. The exploration was over. Now was the time for a confrontation. The entity awaited her. The call of the name Amara ... double quotes held an irresistible power. It was a spiritual hook, yanking her and the rest of the group out of the corridor into a vast expanse. They stumbled forward and froze, paralyzed by the sight before them. They stood on a balcony of flesh, overlooking a vast lake of blood, its surface still and reflecting an eerie red glow. At the center of the blood lake, suspended by hundreds of massive arteries connecting to the ceiling and floor, was it. The heart of the monster god. It was a colossal core of flesh, the size of a small building. Its surface a chaotic mess of tumors, purple-blue veins, and orifices spewing hot vapor. It pulsed slowly, thump ... each beat rippling the blood lake and pressing a heavy weight against their chests. All the light in the room seemed to emanate from this core, a sickly glow of perverse vitality. The stench of viscera and fresh blood was so thick it felt almost tangible. The supernatural screaming was no longer an echo. It was here, emanating from the core itself, a symphony of pain and power. The entity had sensed the weaknesses of each person, and now it began to act not with physical force, but by attacking humanity's greatest weapon, the mind. "They love me," Elena suddenly whispered. Her camera slipped from her hands, dangling on its strap. Her face softened, then broke into a blissful, deranged smile. Her eyes shimmered, staring into an undefined void. "The whole world is watching. The Pulitzer. It's finally mine, ... She was drowning in a hallucination of the fame she'd always claimed, utterly unaware of the horrific reality around her. Beside him, Omar stopped sobbing. He slowly stood upright, but his posture was rigid and alien. His eyes, once kind, were now empty and ancient. He spoke, but his voice was a blend of dozens of voices, male and female, old and young. "We are the peoples. We are. Amenti. Order must be restored." The soul of the old archaeologist had been overtaken by something else. But the most horrific sight came from Calvin, the logical, perpetually grumbling radar specialist began to convulse. A sickening crack echoed as his shoulder joint dislocated on its own. His arm twisted at an impossible angle. He collapsed, then rose slowly, his movements jerky, like a marionette with cut strings. His eyes widened in two streams of black. Blood began to trickle from their corners. "Callum!" Amara screamed, lunging toward him, but she was too late. A fissure appeared on Callum's chest, like the cracks on Omar's skin, but far larger. It spread rapidly, and with a wet rip, his ribcage tore open. Inside, his organs were still there, but they had transformed, pulsating and glowing. A faint red light, a miniature replica of the massive flesh core before them dotted that moment. A hallucination hit Amara. The flesh wound vanished. She was standing in Luxor, at the excavation site that had ruined her career. But the ancient temples, walls were now made of flesh, its hieroglyphs oozing blood. The sarcophagus she'd failed to protect sprang open, but inside was no mummy. It was another version of herself, her body decayed, screaming in silent agony. She screamed, and the hallucination shattered. She snapped back to reality just in. Time to see the puppet-like Callum staggering toward Elena, who was still smiling in blissful ignorance. "Silas, help!" Amara shouted. Silas, the only one unaffected, turned to her, and he smiled. A smile of absolute triumph. "It's time to fully awaken," he said, his voice cutting clearly through the enemy's screams. He didn't attack anyone. He simply raised his hand toward the massive flesh core. His fingers formed a complex gesture, a symbol Amara recognized instantly with abject horror. It was the central glyph in all her father's notes. The symbol of activation. The flesh core responded. The thump, thump, suddenly stopped. For one chillingly silent second, the universe seemed to hold its breath. And then ... thud. A single deafening beat sent a physical shockwave from the core. It wasn't sound. It was a distortion of reality. The world before Amara shattered. The flesh wound, the bloodlet, Callum's transforming corpse, Omar's possessed body, Elena's smiling face. They didn't vanish, but stretched, warped, and tore into millions of digital fragments. Like a glitched video, Amara felt her body pulled by an invisible force into the center of the chaos. The ground was gone, Gravity was gone, and all that remained was red light and the triumphant scream of a god born from blood and flesh. Silas had succeeded, and they had been thrown into its dimension. The first sensation was tearing. Amara's consciousness was stretched into thousands of thin threads, each vibrating in a universe of pain and screams. But as quickly as it unraveled, it was yanked back, fusing into a single entity in a violent spiritual collision. She opened her eyes. Amara was standing, but no longer on the flesh balcony. She stood on what looked like a familiar cobblestone street in Cairo's old quarter. But that was the only familiar thing. The sky wasn't blue or black. It was a massive blood-red membrane of muscle, pulsing and contracting in a slow rhythm, synchronized with the psychic scream that had become the air she breathed. Instead of cars and pedestrians, the street was a river of thick, sluggish blood, flowing past warped, leaning buildings dot, and on the sidewalk, there were others. Hundreds, thousands of people, puppet humans. They moved aimlessly, their motions jerky and lifeless. Their skin was gray and cracked like dry earth. Some stood motionless, heads tilted, mouths agape. This was the horrific vision Elena had seen. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a prophecy. Welcome to the truth, Dr. Khalil. Silas's voice came from beside her, disgustingly calm. He was here, completely unaffected. Beside him, the puppet Callum stood upright, its bleeding eyes staring into the void. Elena was curled on the ground, sobbing in pain. Omar, or whatever possessed him, surveyed the scene with a sickly solemnity. This is the world that will be reborn when the Master returns. Silas continued, his voice dripping with reverence. One consciousness, one purpose. No more war, no more suffering, only unity. At that moment, the entity attacked Amara's mind again. The wet climate dissolved, replaced by the Luxor temple. The sarcophagus stood before her, and the bony hand of her decaying doppelganger reached out, grabbing her wrist. Failure. You are a failure, ... quotes now. Amara screamed, yanking her hand back. It resists, Silas said coldly. Crush its doubt. The puppet Callum sprang into action. It lunged at Amara, its movements unnaturally fast and strong. Amara dodged, slipping and falling into the blood river. She scrambled back, but the puppet was already above her, its twisted arm raised to strike down in a panic. Amara's already scraped hand struck a sharp stone submerged in the blood. A new, deeper cut opened. Her fresh, vibrant red blood began to trickle, mixing with the dark, viscous blood river of this dimension. Something strange happened. The moment the blood touched the river, the entire reality around her shuddered. Vibration, distinct from the core's pulse. It was a disruption, a glitch. The supernatural screaming in her mind stopped for a second, and she felt a powerful resonance from her wound, as if her blood were harmonizing with something far away. The blood river around her wound seemed to recoil, shriveling as if burned. Amara froze. My blood ... She looked at her bleeding hand, then up at the pulsing red flesh sky, where she sensed the presence of the central core. It was reacting to her blood. The puppet Callum raised its arm again, preparing for the killing blow. But Amara was no longer afraid. A cold resolve, a mad epiphany, had replaced her terror. She had found something this entity didn't have, a difference. A weapon she didn't dodge. She stared into the puppet's lifeless eyes, then glanced at Silas, watching her. She wanted him to see this. With a swift, decisive motion, Amara grabbed the sharp stone. Without hesitation, she slashed a deep cut into her other paw. Her blood poured out. In that instant, the entire dimension screamed in agony. The red flesh sky convulsed violently. The blood river boiled and evaporated around her. The puppet Callum froze, its body shaking as if electrocuted, and before Amara, reality tore open. A rift appeared in space, a hazy path cutting through this nightmare. It wasn't an escape. It was a road leading straight to the source of the power, to the heart of the enemy. She had found a way to fight, not with guns or reason, but with the very thing